Good morning. By the time this video releases, it will be Christmas morning. And I do want to say Merry Christmas to all those out there who are watching the video today. However, even at this Christmas season, while I'm thinking of the Savior and my family, I also think about my responsibility to my country. And well, as you can tell, I've got a cat that's cuddling with me a little bit right now. And so this will not be a heavily produced video, just me talking and a little bit of information that I have learned. It is the election season, and with the primaries coming soon, I've got to get to know the candidates in more detail who have made it through the initial primary process. This is not an endorsement, and it's just my initial take on the candidate. On top of that, I'm going to be doing kind of the same type of videos on Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis, Robert Kennedy, and of course Donald Trump, so we can kind of see what to expect out of these people from the history they have already. So we're going to start today with what I found out about Nikki Haley. Nimrata Nikki Haley was born in January 1972 in South Carolina to immigrant parents from India. She does have a pretty darn impressive resume on paper, having graduated from Clemson with a degree in accounting and finance, working in the family business as a bookkeeper and chief financial officer, and taking an active role in civic affairs. This includes fundraising for charitable causes and working as the president of the South Carolina chapter of the National Association of Women Business Owners. She was also involved in Friends of Scouting. She is known to have voted in Democratic primaries prior to 2004, though she did run for the South Carolina House of Representatives as a Republican. She effectively took the seat in the primary in a runoff, defeating incumbent Larry Kuhn, and ran unopposed in the general, and in her re-election campaign in 2006. She handily defeated the Democrat opposition in 2008 for the same seat. In general, she has run and supported a lower taxes platform. She also championed a teacher salary plan that accounts for not just seniority, but job performance. School choice and charter schools have also been among her legislative priorities. She has also put forward pro-life legislation, including a 24-hour waiting period and an abortion ban after 20 weeks. Haley's 2010 run for governor perhaps shows some of her broader appeal. She was endorsed by Mitt Romney, which is going to tick off about half the people watching. She was also endorsed by Sarah Palin, who will tick off the other half of the people watching. The primary election resulted in a runoff, which she won handily, and she defeated her Democrat opponent in the general 51 to 47%. She won her re-election to governor by 14 percentage points, easily outpacing the competition. Her time as governor was marked by controversy. An immigration law passed in her state and signed by Haley was struck down as unconstitutional, for instance. She also had a running feud with some veteran lawmakers in the state's General Assembly. The protests over the Confederate flag happened squarely under her time in office, with her initially supporting flying the flag, then calling for a conversation on the topic, then finally switching to opposing the flag being flown. She opposed a so-called bathroom bill that required transgender people to use the bathroom based on their sex assigned at birth, calling it unnecessary. She is a strong supporter of Israel and opposed the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Partway through her second term as governor, she resigned to take an appointment as ambassador to the United Nations, as appointed by President Donald Trump. During her time at the UN, she advocated for Israel, defended the Trump administration withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Agreement, and declared the U.S. would impose new sanctions on Russia and Syria, though this last one got overturned by the White House. She was pretty darn vocal during her time at the UN, calling out Kadyrov in Chechnya for murders of gay men, charging Iran and Hezbollah with terrorist acts, and calling for sanctions against North Korea for ballistic missile tests. She seemed supportive of moving the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and opposed the expansion of Palestinian territory through legislative fiat by the UN. She likewise raised the issue of China's Uyghur concentration camps and called out the human rights abuses there. She resigned from her ambassadorship to the UN when Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, or CREW, accused her of accepting luxury private plane trips as gifts from South Carolina business leaders. Note that these trips were declared on a 2018 financial disclosure, saying they were gifts from personal contacts and thus not subject to these ethics violations. For some additional context, though, CREW claims to be nonpartisan, but disproportionately targets Republicans over Democrats by and large. Since her term as ambassador, she started an advocacy group called Stand for America, served on the board of Boeing, and created a PAC to endorse candidates in the 2022 midterms. She is not a supporter of Trump in the electoral seasons, having supported Marco Rubio and then Ted Cruz in 2016. She did vote for Trump in that election as the, quote, best person based on the policies and dealing with things like Obamacare. She was clear that she was not a Trump fan, however. That said, she opposed Trump's second impeachment over the January 6 riots, despite calling Trump's actions that day not his finest. She has pledged to support him in the general election if he is the eventual nominee, though she has stated that she does not believe that he could win the general election. As a presidential candidate, she has taken positions in support of a 15-week national abortion ban, with some exceptions, opposed the participation of trans women in women's sports, taken a firm stance that only women can get pregnant and bear children, while still meeting with noted trans advocate Caitlyn Jenner. On fiscal issues, she's called for significant budget cuts to Medicare and Social Security, raising the retirement age, and criticized the pandemic relief acts by both Republican and Democrat administrations. As for the environment, she claims that if there's going to be a significant change in greenhouse gas emissions, it needs to start with China and India, both bigger emitters than the U.S. She opposes, however, drastic efforts to reduce said emissions. As for foreign policy, which is really the area she's been most vocal in recently, she's been calling for cuts to foreign aid to countries that she sees as enemies of the United States. She also called for additional aid to Ukraine and rejected ceasefire calls in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Haley also called for a tougher approach to Iran, saying, "You've got to punch them hard." Nikki Haley's performance in the presidential debates was pretty much a mixed bag. In some areas, she's been a vocal and intelligent advocate for her positions. However, she was particularly a fallen victim for Vivek Ramaswamy's gotcha-style questions, where he frames a question about irrelevant information in a way that it doesn't matter how she responds. Either likely response can be spun as a negative. This does show a certain amount of a lack of preparedness for the rough and tumble style of politics that are espoused by Ramaswamy and Trump, though she does seem to have a pretty firm grasp on traditional politics and typical politicians. Her attempts to appeal to girl power in one of the recent debates really did not do her any favors, and her tough talk response when called out for her adult daughter with a TikTok account pretty much fell flat, at least in my opinion. Neither of these items really felt like a principled policy decision or a valid defense, and both don't really fly with the typical Republican base voter, who is really more concerned with effective positions than the gender or race of the candidate. So what do I think of Nikki Haley? Well, it feels like she is serving two masters. She's been a long-term politician here. She seems to be almost at war with her own self on trying to both appeal to the existing Republican base and to the Trump base at the same time. She's trying to not burn her bridges while still appearing to be a significant force in the electorate. Perhaps she's not really all that in touch with the average voter today, though. It seems like she might have spent enough time in the foreign affairs situation that she's less in touch with what the average person thinks about. She does seem to have pretty good positions, but sometimes really doesn't stick with them completely through. This seems to be a relatively rare thing, but look at, for instance, the Confederate flag situation. She initially was strongly in favor of continuing to fly the flag, then wishy-washy on it, and then opposed to flying the flag. She does seem to be an international interventionist and perhaps just a bit too bellicose. Some of that could be her close association with Boeing, a major defense contractor, but I think it is more a sign of her overall worldview, which pretty much says that you have to face these types of bullies in the world, or they're going to bully their way all over you. Recent polling has put her within a few percentage points of Donald Trump, kind of a surprise to a certain extent, considering the nature of the field. Now, a lot of that is in comparison to Joe Biden, where she definitely registers more favorably overall than Donald Trump does in a head-to-head match. However, the real question is who exactly is pushing her candidacy? She came from behind in a situation that really looked like she was well and truly in the dumps. Now, Ron DeSantis' fall from grace, his meteoric fall from the high digits in the polling, has resulted in quite a lift for Nikki Haley. But so is the feeling that she's being pushed. And it does not feel like an organic grassroots push, at least at this point in time. A lot of that is just because that's the information I have available to me. Some of it just doesn't feel quite as natural as it could be. That does not mean that Nikki Haley is a bad candidate or a bad choice. It merely means that she may be being pushed by a certain constituency that wants her to be the candidate instead of Donald Trump. That does have a pretty significant area of people behind it after all. So what do you think of Nikki Haley? Who do you think is really pushing her candidacy to the top? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this type of quick kind of rundown of the information about a candidate, give me that old thumbs up and let me know. And if you want to tell me which candidates you're most interested in, absolutely let me know that as well. I would love to see who you're supporting, what you think about Nikki Haley in particular in this video, and anything like that. You have a great rest of your day. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you on the next video.